Anyways, but welcome. So glad that you chose to spend your Thursday night with us, and I'm gonna pass this off to Ryan.
Hey everybody, my name's Ryan Shaw. For those of you that were here last time, you got to hear me interview Akia briefly, but just to give you a quick intro for those of you that don't know who I am, I grew up in Columbus, graduated from Ohio State a couple years ago. My degree is actually in dance, and then I have a couple of extraneous minors because I get bored really quickly. And then I was a professional dancer in Los Angeles, also consulted for some startups out there, came back and have kind of weaved my way into some strange career that's going on in Columbus around marketing and creative direction and who else knows. But probably, January, February, was roped into the Collaborate and Elevate family prior to its full existence by one Michael Red and Danny Ortiz. Yes, everyone's laughing because that's kind of how it goes around here, if you don't know. And so this whole space, the wave space, and kind of everything that Michael and Danny are about and what this community about is exactly what Collaborate and Elevate talks about. It's about bringing people together, whether that's around one person's mission, another person's mission, but all around this idea about bringing people together and lifting each other up. Whether that's a helping hand from above or a little push from behind or all moving up together. That's what Mike and Danny are both about. That's what they've always been about, at least since I've known them, which is seemingly a really long time and not all at once. And so that's what Collaborate and Elevate came to be, was to bring people in and bring people together that all had that same mindset around how can we make each other better and push each other to be better and connect with like-minded individuals. And so that's kind of where the last, I think we've done 5 events thus far, where the ideas have come from. Now that's been a group of us kind of sitting together at various points in time and saying, we think it'd be awesome to hear from this person. So last time we got to talk, Akia interviewed Adia, who Adia has an awesome story. She did international law for a very long time and then left a super stable and very lucrative career as a lawyer to start a company, start her own makeup brush company. So we got to hear about that, and you just heard very briefly Akia's story, just kind of her personal journey through mental health, and she started Real Girls Fart, and then there's a book coming out of it, and now she's working with Nationwide Children's. And then we also talked to Sam Werner, who has a really interesting story and perspective around holistic wellness. She was in Africa for a period of time, came back, and kind of had very different ideas about what that looked like. And that whole event came from some people saying, we know these people, they've got great stories, and we think that everyone could learn something from them and with them, and let's bring them all together and talk about it. The reason why I say all of this is to say 2019 is coming up. It's right around the corner. Load. And we're now thinking ahead. We're like, okay, what's next? What's happening next? As I'm sure a lot of people are. It's kind of that time of the year where you reflect back and look, okay, what did 2018 look like? What did the last year? What were the ups? What were the downs? The wins, the losses, whatever you want to call them. What did that all look like? And now, what's 2019 going to be? So I say that to say, we want to make sure that this event, this Collaborate and Elevate, does exactly that. We want to bring people together and continue to push the boundaries on what it means to be better, personally, professionally, whatever that looks like. So for those of you that have been to other events, or maybe this is your first time, or maybe you've been to something like this, and every time you walk away and you're kind of like, that didn't really check the boxes that I was looking for it to check. You heard from some people, got a new perspective, but it was kind of what you had already heard before. What do you want to hear? Is it more stuff about mental health? Is it more stuff about personal wellness? We heard from John Weaver last time, and John is a lawyer, but doing law in a very different way. It's a subscription-based law firm where, there's different levels and everything rolls into that instead of, putting an hourly rate. And he talked about what that looks like and why he did it. What are some things that people will want to hear about?
How people go about connecting people to fill in certain, slots or areas for their whatever venture, if possible.
Cool. So connecting people, how people connect people into their ventures or their businesses. Am I hearing that correctly? Everyone's like, no, we don't care. Yeah, what's up, Besser?
A lot of startups, what is the true percentage of 2018? What was the startups' failures? Was there anybody successful out of this year? And then what can, can we kind of highlight those people from this past year into next year?
Cool. So kind of like a startup recap from 2018. I think that's probably a great idea. People who have been a part of failed ones. Okay, I like that a lot. Yeah.
Around the people that are in this room, a lot of people want to give, want to be mentors, want to share what their experiences, what they've learned with others so that they can elevate and all boats will rise. I think that's something that, when we listen to stories and we hear things, taking that into maybe what we collaborate after these discussions, take that to another level of mentorship and maybe set up times to come back to this place and meet on more personal issues that maybe you don't want to bring up in front of the bit larger group.
Absolutely. By show of hands on that subject, how many people in the room would say that they have and or are looking for a mentor? Just show of hands. Yeah, okay, great. I think that's an awesome one. I was just talking to Keita before the event started about the fact that that's something that's really, really meaningful, that is kind of a difficult avenue to find those people that you could connect with or that are willing to connect with. So I think that's an awesome idea. Okay, I don't want to force everyone's brains to overwork. So I will sign off and say thank you guys for sharing, and thanks for being a part of Collaborate and Elevate 2018. There's only good things can come from here. So thank you guys for coming. Thanks for donating, and thanks for being a part of this vision. So I'm gonna hand over the mic to Aaron Halloran and Kenny Sipes, and they're gonna share some wisdom with us for the evening.
So, I forgot my ugly sweater in my car, I'm not gonna lie. But if you think this one's ugly, just kidding. Kenny, hi.
Can I step back? I feel like we're in. Hey.
Hey, what's up? So this is my 4th day in a row of seeing Kenny Sipes, because I frequent the Roosevelt, you could say. So quick intro on myself. My name is Aaron Halloran. I work for Calypso. I do innovation consulting. Graduated from Ohio State in May. Got bored 2 months into work, and now on my nights and weekends, I'm raising an impact investment fund. So if you know any millionaires, let me know. We're actively raising, and we're trying to deploy capital to companies that really just need the resources to make a really cool, sustainable impact. Tonight, we have the opportunity to hear from Kenny Sipes. So Kenny, I met a couple of years ago. I made my dad cry one time because I told him that Kenny was gonna officiate my wedding someday. So Kenny, I hold in a very high regard. He's done some really incredible things for Columbus, Ohio. So right off the bat, I guess, Kenny, could you tell us just more about you as a human being? We'll talk about the Roosevelt, but tell us, where are you from? Tell us about your family, tell us those questions.
Okay. I'm going to see if I got a text back from a friend of mine real quick about mentors. Okay, good. I got a good input on mentors if you want that later. Alan Proctor text right back. That was pretty impressive.
Good.
That was really
That is
impressive.
impressive.
Not bad for an Ivy League guy. So, what do I want to say? Where do I want to start? I don't even know. So I'm 53 years old. That's the big one. I don't usually tell that, so if you tell other people, I'll get you. But I have 5 kids, 1 before marriage and 4 in the marriage that I've been in for 27 years. My kids in that marriage are 16, 19, 25, and 27. The middle 2 work at the Roosevelt, and the oldest works at the church that we attend, and the youngest is up and coming. They all do music in some form or another, from hardcore to ambient. So if anybody's familiar with the band Copeland, my middle son, I don't know, there's 4 of them up here. My middle son is actually going on tour for the opening band on that in a couple weeks, or actually in February. So he's going to be all over the country because he's kind of like that guy that can play all the instruments. So you're just like, hey, can you play keyboards tonight? So grew up an only child. I was a spoiled little white dude in the suburbs. Grew up in Minnesota and moved here when I was 11.
Wait, say Minnesota one more time.
That's how they say Minnesota. They say Minnesota. Yeah, Minnesota. It's snowing. I don't talk like that anymore. It's always funny when they come here, my relatives. I'm like, that's so odd. But I moved here when I was 11. I was an airline brat, which really meant in my generation, before 9/11, it was really easy to fly free when you were an airline employee family member. So most planes weren't even full. So I mean, my dentist was in Minnesota 13 years after I moved here still. Grew up, graduated from Pickerington High School, and then I've really had kind of, I guess, 3 lifetimes. You know, I was a teenage drunk and alcoholic. Was arrested and taken to drug rehab at the age of 17 years old. Quite famous in Pickerington at the time for doing that. And last time I ever used drugs or alcohol was actually in the treatment center. We were in there during Thanksgiving, and all the kids got out on Thanksgiving to go with their parents, and one kid, not me, snuck in LSD. And so I was a part of that whole situation. It's impossible to argue drug addiction when you used in the drug rehab center. It's like, well, I don't know if I have a problem. Dude, you did LSD in the place that's supposed to keep you off LSD. It's probably not an addiction. So, but that was when I was 17. I've never used drugs or alcohol since then.
How many years is that?
And I can't add that much. Somebody asked me that the other day. 36.
36? That's
So
amazing.
I got sober in 82.
That's
So before
huge.
all of you were born. So 36. And then, so I worked in drug rehab for a little bit after that. And, but then I left there and got into music retail. So a really interesting story. So my culture shift changed in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know this kind of story, right? And it was really incredible. So my first real job was sky capping at the airport, which I was 19 years old, and I was around all 45 to 75-year-old black men who kind of took me in and mentored me in a way that Pickerington white dude doesn't get. And then I got really involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started attending meetings at 20th and Atchison and downtown East Leonard, and really got mentoring in life from that. And as that changed and I left that job situation, I ended up in music retail, where they used to sell records and tapes and cassettes and 8-tracks and all those things. They do that a little bit, but not quite like they did before. And I ran an urban music store. So I was the white guy in the hood at the record store. And every year, Sony Music flew the 40 most prominent independent urban music retailers to New York to kind of celebrate what we had done. And there was 40 of us. There was 38 African Americans, and there was one white woman who married a black man in an Atlanta store, and there was me. And when you're the white dude and 6'4" and redheaded, you stick out a little bit. So there's a lot of pictures of me with pretty famous people that it looks like I'm photoshopped in. So like if you go to my Twitter profile, there's a picture of me and Destiny's Child when Beyonce was like 18.
I think at the next Roosevelt, we need to wallpaper the walls with those photos.
Well, that one doesn't look quite as photoshopped as I have a picture of little Kim and her crew and Bone Thugs and Harmony, and it just looks like, what's that guy? Like, who's that guy? So that was a lifetime. That was, and I still love that. I mean, I still have people even coming to the Roosevelt who were a part of that, because it was kind of it was a great store. It was old record and tape outlets, if they're old enough in Columbus to have been a part of that. And it was like barbershop. It was just kind of like people came in and they hung, police officers and DSCC employees, and we just kind of, you didn't have to buy a record. You just came in to kind of talk life. It was beautiful. So kind of a precursor of the personality of the Roosevelt. And then I left there and became a youth and college pastor in Pataskala. I don't have a college education. I've never done ministry, and they hired me. And I did that for about 10 years, which is where Danny and I crossed paths. And then that led eventually to where I'm at now.
Okay, so tell us about the Roosevelt. How many people have been to the Roosevelt? Okay, yeah, that's a pretty good show of hands. So I was introduced to the Roosevelt maybe, 2 or 3 years ago, and I give the Roosevelt a lot of credit for the fact that I actually graduated from college. There were a lot of days when I questioned it, but I would go in and be really stressed out about a paper, and I would see Kenny, and he would give me just the right amount of encouragement and also the right stupid joke, and paper was done. I went home. So I think all of us here have been really impacted by the Roosevelt. Could you tell us about where the inspiration came from? What was the startup process like?
That can be a long story. So I'm never not humbled when people raise their hand and say they've been there. I speak at Ohio State a bunch. I mean, they take me to Fisher Business all the time. I'm like, I don't have a college degree. What am I doing here? I never tell them until I'm done. But when the kids all raise their hand that they've been there, I'm just like, it's fascinating. I'm going to ask you first. How did we meet? Because I think that kind of tells the story of the Roosevelt a little bit,
Sure.
and then I'll tell the background.
Okay, so we met, I think I was working at Hot Chicken Takeover, and so I was very close with Joe, and Joe kept talking about this guy that started this coffee shop, and I was like, there's another coffee shop except Mission? What are you talking about? And so finally I rolled into the Roosevelt, had a latte, sat there, and all of a sudden every meeting I had for the next 6 months was at the Roosevelt. So my sister was there, my mom was there, my all of my business meetings were there, my studying happened there, and then probably 5 people in this room I became friends with because of the Roosevelt. And so it was just it was easy, it was natural, and I spent way too much time there. And I normally put on Leon Bridges on the record player. So if you've ever been there and Leon is on, that was me, yeah.
So I will try to abbreviate this a little bit. So I did college and youth ministry for a long time. And so one thing happened when you run an urban music store and then you go to an all-white church, it's just really bizarre. I mean, I guess it shouldn't be for the white guy, but it was bizarre for me. And I sat in a room one day. I'd been there about 6-9 months. And I didn't really have any background in ministry, so I don't really have any filter to walk through. I don't really have an understanding of going to leadership and asking permission. I just didn't know those things. Plus, I was pushing 40, so I felt like I kind of moved past permission stage. But I was doing middle school ministry, and I had a bunch of middle school suburban kids, and I thought they just have no clue. I was just kind of there isn't anything I can teach them in Scripture that's going to get them to notice their privilege. And so I did go to leadership, and I said, hey, I want to organize a mission trip. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to take 20 of my core students in middle school, 13-year-old kids, to the most dangerous city in America. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, well, that's what I'm going to do. And so we went on a trip to East St. Louis. And if you don't know East St. Louis's history, it's unbelievable. Even if you look at the 1990s and the lack of even a tax base and police department and a fire department, it's kind of one of the most desolate inner cities in the world. And we kind of use these stories to kind of prep our kids, but they would even. So there's no tax base because there just was no income, and chemical companies would come in and they would build in East St. Louis, and then they fence their property, and then they would incorporate it as their own township, and even that wasn't going into East St. Louis. So it was just a really hard place. And we were part of a mission experience with a bunch of other churches, I actually literally worked on a house that was this wide. We roofed this house. But we went in on a Saturday, and I was new to it. I was trying to figure things out, and it was Tuesday morning, and I was just pretty pissed off. My kids they weren't getting it. This was mission vacation or something. And a tragedy occurred on Tuesday that our kids were working on like 16 different houses, so I had about 2 kids on each of the houses, and there's like a house here and a house here, and that they were working on, and the house between them burnt down, like right in front of them. And they watched this grandmother come to the curb with like 6 grandkids and just watch their life disappear. And they got it, right? I mean, in a tragic way, like just watch my kids just break. They just fell apart that night. Not because of pity and not because of like, it was just, oh my God, I get it. You know, and so the next day they actually had all pooled a bunch of money together for a free day, and they said they came to me, and all the girls had already been to the house, gotten all the sizes of the grandkids, and they said, hey, we want to go to Walmart and buy everything they need. And so they did, and then Friday we had a church service and we presented it to that family. And that was the beginning of doing and creating those kind of experiences and getting them intentionally involved in places they would not go. So I mean, we have a roaster in Franklinton. I used to take kids, make them fast for like 48 hours and make them pick up trash in Franklinton for like 12. They won't forget that, will they? But I did that for a long time. And for a few years later, after I kind of got my feet under me in ministry, I decided to take a group to Lesotho, Africa. And that's where everything kind of personally changed for me. It had changed already, but just kind of, my wife, I always say this, my wife said the man who got on the plane just has never come back. He didn't return, in a good way. But in a way, just I viewed life completely different. She knew I was restless forever after that. Like I wasn't who I was. And it was just because I had never seen poverty at that level. I had never seen a whole generation wiped out because of AIDS. We would go to mountaintops in Lesotho and we would preach the gospel, and the missionary would preach HIV testing because the witch doctors controlled so much of the remote areas in Africa. They convinced all the men that the way you got AIDS was that you got tested by the Westerners. So nobody got tested because the witch doctors convinced them if they went, that's how they get it, rather than actually get the treatment and prevention that could possibly occur. And so when we were going house to house to kind of share the gospel and do what we did, there was a bunch of old people and there was a bunch of teenagers, and everybody else was gone. There was this whole generation of 25 to 40 was gone. And so just kind of came back kind of wrecked from that and just trying to have perspective about what that looked like. And a couple of years after that, my wife came home one day, or I came home, and she said, hey, if you ever need to leave the church, I'm at peace with that. And I was like, what was that supposed to mean? She said, I'm just telling you, if you ever feel led to leave, you don't have to come home and convince me. And so, sure enough, I mean, I love what I do. I mean, like, I love what I despise my age group, okay? So, I mean, I'm just like, I think I've invited 2 people my age to my house since I opened the Roosevelt. Aaron's been to my house and had dinner, because I'd rather hang with just somebody who's not shooting for retirement. And so, all that to be said,
I do put into my 401k, so I'm sorry
that?
about that. I said I do put into my 401k,
okay, yeah. I
so
don't
I am
have one
shooting
of those.
for it.
Don't do a startup at 48 because you won't have one of those. You just get rid of it. So I got restless, and even though I loved what I did, which was a really hard conflict for me, and eventually kind of went on a journey with my wife to kind of discover what exactly does this look like, had our faith tested, felt like our faith was tested, and that was the end result. Oh, okay, God pushed us to this limit to consider these things, but we're not going to really do those things. He just wanted to see if we would consider them, and then 4 months later, I, spiritually speaking, felt like I was in this phase of holy disobedience where it was like it was September, God had revealed to me in May, and it's September and I'm miserable, and God's saying, oh, we talked in May. Like, we already had a decision made with you. We've discussed this. And so I literally walked into the office of my church in November of 2012 at the age of 48 with very little retirement and a very secure job, paying very well, doing what I love, and I resigned without a plan. And they said, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. And he said, well, can you stay on a few months? Because, we don't have a plan either. I'm like, yeah, I don't have a plan. That's fine. And so I stayed on a few months. And when spring hit, we finally got to this place, like, what are we going to do? My wife was kind of like at the, like, I don't really care what it is, just decide kind of place. Because there was a CC's Pizza in Pickerington that closed down. I remember driving by one day. I said, we should open a coffee shop. And my wife went, you're not leaving the church to start a coffee shop. And then it got to May, and she goes, I don't really care what you do. And so we landed on a coffee shop, and we decided to focus on 3 topics of injustices that needed thought, we felt. And what has been really kind of beautiful for the most part since then is that they're really non-divisive. So we fund initiatives that are fighting the injustices of hunger, unclean water, and human trafficking. We should die of preventable waterborne disease, and nobody should lack freedom. Those are things that we felt like party lines, economic lines, racial lines, like those are all kind of things like, okay, it doesn't matter what phase of life you're in, we could probably agree they shouldn't be unfairly, enslaved. You should have access to the ability to not die from a disease that none of us will probably have to worry about because we don't even consider waterborne diseases for the most part here, and shouldn't starve. And so that's what we landed on in May of 2013. I left the church in August, and then from there we are a nonprofit. So the Roosevelt actually is a nonprofit. So we applied in September of 2013. It took us a year to get that status. I don't think it's that bad for it now, but back for some reason it was really slow. And then it was navigating funding. It was navigating a lease. It was navigating a location. It was navigating a board, and it was raising enough money to open the doors.
Okay. So if you've been to the Roosevelt, you've probably seen the little cards that show some of the impact that they've been able to have since founding. So could you tell us more about how you quantify impact? Because I think that's something that a lot of social enterprises struggle with. Right. Is sure, we're having this financial return, but how do you really put a number to saving lives, right? And so could you tell us about that process and how you're able to quantify that and how you're able to share that with your customer base?
Yeah, if I was organized, I would have brought some of those annual reports. But we do a real
just go to the Roosevelt tomorrow. Yeah.
If we do a real graphic annual report, so you can kind of nobody likes a bullet point list, so we really want to. We had one created and drawn, but in that we kind of navigate. We create the conversation of what we've given. So as of April of 2018. After 3 years of being open, we had given $79,000 away from wells in Africa. We're about to hit 100,000, so we're pretty pumped about that. But from wells in Africa to faith mission meals, to trauma therapy hours for people in Africa, to trauma therapy hours at Grace Haven here locally. And now we actually, because social enterprise is kind of a really healthy thing in Columbus, Ohio. And if you're not familiar with Social Ventures, CBUS, Social Ventures is run by Alan Proctor. It kind of mobilizes what's going on with those. And I'm on that board. I'm just going to plug this really quick. There is a mentoring process on the board. So if you are interested in creating some type of business with social impact, there's a mentor link at socialventurescbus.com. There's a mentor link where you can actually fill out exactly where you're looking for mentoring. And I tell you, it's being underutilized. So, whether it's accounting or marketing or business plan or funding or fundraising or whatever it is, there are 150 people in a position to mentor at any level in that, and they're not getting too many people trying to wing it on their own without maybe and this is a great service. So, and I think it's free. I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure it's free.
I think it is too.
I think it is too. So, to say that, this year I got invited onto this thing called a Social Impact Measurement Survey Tool Committee. So what it was is they were getting to this point where they felt like a lot of social businesses, social enterprises were calling themselves that, and there wasn't really tangible results. So some of them were, are they really doing what they say they do? Are they, is Hot Chicken really employing at-risk people, which they are? But at the same time, is that being quantified, and how do they do that? And so on that, we kind of were able to more specifically pay attention to how many people are, things. So this year, this money, we're about 29,000 for this year, has affected about 15,000 people. And that's everything from 1,000 girls getting trained in middle school about what to look for human trafficking signs, to 13,000 bars of soap in hotels around the country at major sporting events with the human trafficking number on it. So now we're starting to measure through that lens a little bit better, to kind of give us an idea of how to best navigate our money. And some of that, it's kind of like, sure, I can donate 1,000 meals at Faith Mission and 1,000 people are getting fed at least once. And then when you only affect 4 people in a Uganda safe house with trauma therapy hours, that number is skewed, right? I mean, that money's rebuilding and reconciling and restoring the dignity of somebody who's been enslaved for 10, 12 years. And if that's only 4 people, how do you measure that? And that was one thing that really was frustrating in the church for me. Everything was measured through, did they make a decision? Did they get baptized? And then I'm like, hey, talk to me in 10 years when I pastor their wedding, and then I'll tell you if there's been fruit, because that's not fruit. That's just a transaction.
So a huge theme that I'm picking up, and especially in the holiday season, is like giving back. So more than just like existing as a business, you're doing something that's like revolutionary in the way that you're able to like maintain your like profitability and sustainability so much that you're also able to give back to the community. So I think like a big portion of that is just like motivation, and how do you sustain that? So like I'm sure there's been days where like things are not easy, right? Like you've seen weird problems come up, maybe an issue with an employee or anything that's happening within like roasting or these other things that like make this a really challenging career path. How do you maintain your motivation to give back through all of those things?
I don't know. Probably, it's really my faith more than anything else, because there's really I'm not practically doing anything that's business wise, right? We're trying to secure a couple $100,000 to build out our second location. And on paper, it looks a little weird. We're aggressive givers, so what motivates me, I always say this is kind of like one of the things in church that drives me crazy. It doesn't matter if it's church or what faith system you have. Most faith systems are built on faith. And if you are not willing to risk anything, then like, what's the point of faith, right? Like faith is just this generic concept that doesn't mean anything unless you so for me, I resigned without a plan at the age of 48. That's stupid. A friend of mine said, well, instead of you having a midlife crisis, buy a Corvette and have an affair. He's like, you're having a spiritual midlife crisis and doing crazy stuff. But the bottom line is like, we have to think through, like, if you have any type of faith, then what is it that you are actually trusting in, that you have nothing to fall back on? And for me, that had to be a creator. It had to be this sustainer. And it's, we, be transparent. Like, we were at this financial income. Lori would say we built our life to be where we were in our 40s and to be comfortable and not really worry about it, right? And then the day we opened, Lori had seen a bonus every month for 10 years. She's never seen a bonus again. So like all of this kind of comfortability has like decreased to here. And now we're just trying to, so we're almost, I feel like we're in our mid 20s again, trying to get back into the 30s and 40s where we'll actually be, which will be 60s for me, right? But, so it really is faith. It's just like, if we can have the ability to affect people's lives. And if you're not familiar, the Roosevelt's core values are love, justice, coffee, humility, and optimism. So we don't hire people to be that. We hire people that exhibit that when we hire them. And that's super important to us. And so there's a different part of the Roosevelt that's not in an annual report and that's not in a financial bottom line. It's when I can bring 5 20-somethings to my house from all kinds of faith backgrounds and just say, let's do dinner and be comfortable, and we do, right? And part of that for me too is like my wife kind of sits at home going, sounds great, I don't see any of it. So every once in a while I like bring people home that I love and say, hey, here's Aaron and Lily and Stefan, and let's kind of hang and be a part of that.
Yeah, so I think the coolest thing, it had probably been like 6 months since I had a home cooked meal, right? And all of a sudden like Kenny's like, what are you doing on Thursday, right? And so I go, I meet his wife, we drive like 45 minutes into the middle of nowhere, and I'm like, I haven't like not been within like 3 minutes of a skyscraper in like 6 months, and just to like sit and have a home-cooked meal, like I legitimately, like, my relationship with God has been so impacted by Kenny that I can't even describe it. And like, I would walk into the Roosevelt when I would not walk into church, right? Like, I was convinced I would walk into church and catch on fire, but I would go into the Roosevelt like hungover and a mess, and like none of my assignments were finished, but like Kenny was there to offer a really warm hug. And so like, I think the Roosevelt just has this energy that like you just cannot describe in words. So if you haven't been there, definitely check it out. But yeah, so it's amazing to hear about your faith and the way that you've given back. Tell us about like your development as an entrepreneur. There's a lot of people in this room who I know are currently entrepreneurs or working for startups, and you came into this with like no business background, right? So like, what have you learned? What are you working on right now? What skill sets do you think are like critical for this group of people to be working on?
Yeah, I think the three things that people try not to budget when they start up are their own salary, their legal fees, and their accounting fees, which all seem like, well, you know, I'm good enough at QuickBooks to figure that out. I've got a guy who'll do some pro bono work, and I can do LegalZoom, you know, whatever. But I'm just saying, like, it took us 3 years to kind of invest in those things. Also, you know, we didn't make a salary the first, 2 years that was sustainable, so which dug this hole for us. So those are the three things. I think one thing that's been really gifted for me is that I ran retail for 10 years in my 20s and 30s. So all of that kind of jaded retail thing that every person who's ever been in retail has had, right? Is that jaded, that customer looked at me funny, I'm not gonna treat him nice kind of thing. That's gone from me. And so I've become a lot, before I used to hire out of need. Aaron quit, we gotta eat somebody. Oh, you go on a job? Okay. But now I'd rather work 80 hours a week to find that person, because we just hired these 2 kids in the last 2 months and knocked it out of the park again. I mean, like every once in a while I'm just like, dang it, they're good too, they're gonna work. So that's really important as we expand into a second location, which we signed a lease at the Gravity Project in Franklinton. That's one of the things that, we're trying to measure, so we're actually talking to our team now about the way it would split and how they would want to manufacture a new staff underneath them. So just learning that. And then I would just say this, I've never been prideful enough to not ask for help. So I just don't care. I mean, Joe DeLoss is 20 years younger than me, and he's probably one of my closest, if not closest friend, and he's my business mentor. So if I got questions, I just call Joe. I don't, it's just kind of like, and I ask, right? Where I'm on the social ventures board, sometimes I'm like, what are we talking about? Can somebody, but just stay humble, stay humble in a way where you can be a sponge and receive. And then, my current pastor is a really good friend of mine. He has always preached, just run with your strengths and quit trying to learn your weaknesses, and he's so right. I mean, there's some time where I'm like, I'm going to do this accounting thing. I want to, and I just want to shoot myself, right? So, and now I'm delegating that stuff out, and or just ask for help.
Sure.
Like my accountant just helped us write our whole 5-year budget, but I needed to sit down in a room with her and just kind of navigate the conversation with some help. So, stay humble.
Yeah. So to keep going on that theme, tell us about Frank. He's someone who's always in the store, and someone I see as almost like the assistant Kenny. Tell us about the process of finding someone you trust that much.
Well, Frank, if you don't know Frank, he works for me. He's the Mr. Rogers of coffee. He's the most optimistic man on the planet. Let me give you an example. So we just have a steam module at our business. And steam module is what you froth your milk with and make sure you get the pretty latte art. And it was not working right. And this is a couple Fridays ago. And Frank never gets flustered. But he was on the phone from 9 a.m. till 4:15 on the tech. Just and every, with a new, why didn't you try that? And he never, Frank's I think I wore the tech guys out. And I'm like, you probably did. But Frank is, so this is pretty interesting. So Frank read about the Roosevelt on Facebook before it happened. he called me up and said, hey, I'd love to like talk to you about what this looks like. He had worked at Stoff's at that point in time for about 3 years. We did lunch, really connected. I had a pop-up the next day happening at where we are now, where we weren't built out yet, so we were just kind of like having pour over coffee and check out the space. And by the time I got home, he had texted me and said, hey, I called off work tomorrow, so I can come hang with you. And so Frank was in from that day. I actually tweeted this yesterday. Life is hard, so surround yourself with people who make it easier. And Frank makes my life easier because he just doesn't get down, and he fights through the things that are hard to fight through. And he's just a doer and a finisher. Our roaster is the most expensive roaster in the city. We have an $80,000 machine. They're usually 35 or 40.
It's beautiful.
It is a Cadillac.
Like, beautiful.
But Frank has tore apart parts of that probably nobody should with the just precision, and I will get it. Like we have a grinder that's down in one of the shops we source right now, and he's right now. Well, he's at a latte art competition, but after that he'll be working on it. So, but what Frank did, and hopefully I did, is we kind of created the personality, what we expect our staff to be. Like it's like we're not manufacturing. It's like we really like people. We really want to talk to anybody who comes in here, and as you know, I think I had a staff meeting the other night. I had to kind of communicate to my kids that I feel like they don't necessarily know what's going on. They do, like something like Dan Sharp. Anybody who know who Dan Sharp is? Dan Sharp's the vice president of the Columbus Foundation. He has a cortado at 7 a.m. every morning, and he has a conversation with my employees like they're equivalents, like they're on the same. And Dan sees it like that, but I just kind of, I tell him, like, listen, Dan Sharp, vice president, largest private foundation in the Midwest, is having coffee with you every morning on a personal level. That's, Shannon Hardin's here almost every day of the week, setting, the city agenda through conversations he's having in this space. So some of that is just like humbling. And then again, you don't put that on an annual report, but it has power and it has legs, and it does have impact outside of the shop.
Definitely. I can't even begin to describe like the number of business meetings and things that I've witnessed at the Roosevelt that have just like set Columbus on fire. So tell us what's next. So right now there's the store on Long. Mm-hmm. There's the store out in the burbs somewhere. So tell us about that. Tell us about the roasting, and then what do you see in the future?
So we could have just done the Roosevelt and it had been okay, but I decided to do more. I think a couple things happened. One, if I could increase impact with more opportunities, let's do that. Two, I kind of want to have Frank around forever. And Bethany runs the Long Street store, and she's like the most loyal woman on the planet. I kind of want her around and I want them to feel like they can have a career with us. So that's kind of the basis of moving into the next level. So three things happened for about a year and a half. One is we started to plan for a roaster company. So we were using beans from Stumptown Coffee and One Line Coffee, and we decided to start our own roaster company. So we partnered with Otterbine's Master's Business Program, and they spent 13 weeks and built basically the pro forma I presented to everybody we came in contact with. And we raised a little over $200,000 to launch that roaster and use that money to, again, affect those topics that we've already discussed. If I was really prepared, I would have brought a bag of that too. Is there a bag back there? Is there a Griffin bag back there? So we licensed our brand to Olentangy River Brewing Company in Lewis Center. So does anybody know Ryan Wilkins at the Ronald McDonald House? Ryan and his buddies just kind of aligned with our vision. And so when they were dreaming up this brewery, they were just like, what can we do to put a Roosevelt in it? And we didn't feel like we wanted to expand inside on our own. We just had too many things going on. So we developed a licensing agreement. So they basically, it says Roosevelt. It has our menu. They have everything that we do. They just staff it, run it, advertise it, and they pay a fee for us to be a part of that. So that's one of those things where we feel like that licensing fee will help fund the funding that we'll need for the build out in the second location, which is Gravity, which is in Franklinton. And we have to be open by July 6th, so that's when I tell everybody. But if you ever go down West Broad and see the Gravity Project on the right, there's a 4-story mural on that building. We will be right under that mural. So we'll just have this really great identity. And for me, I feel like we kind of have the east side of the city, and it'd be nice to kind of pull some of the west side of the city. I mean, they don't seem that far apart, but you know, if you walk from my shop to Cosi, it's about a little over a mile, 1.2 miles. So there's a bunch of people who walk to things, and so we hope that we can pull that demographic over there.
Awesome. So I'll ask you just one more question and then open it up for questions from the audience. If you could leave this room full of people with one thing, maybe like a common theme, something you've learned, something you live by, what would that be?
I think it's in my Twitter bio also, and it's simply, if you want to get happy, forget yourself.
Awesome. Okay, who has a question for Kenny? What did I ask?
You asked them all.
I asked all of them? No, I thought you said you asked them wrong, and I was like, how do you ask if people have questions wrong? All right, I'll come back.
So, you left your job, left your income. You left your job. You left your job, you left your income. How did you, with, I'm assuming, dependents, right? That's what it sounds like. How were you able to put food on the table during that time?
So I was on the way to church the other day. I don't know why, but I was going through all of my old photos. You know, like you take screenshots. There's like 1,000 of them on your phone, right? So I went to the beginning, right? And it was 2015, and I got nominated for Ohio's as Outstanding Entrepreneur of the Year. And actually, I got honorable mention, got like 2nd or 3rd place. And I have a text saved for my wife that I screenshot that says, "Isn't it funny, you get nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year and we don't have money for groceries this week." So it's been, so I would say the thing that I've done the most that's been frustrating is I stripped the security of my family away. It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. So, we're still winging it. I just borrowed money to do Christmas. So we're still figuring that out. And a lot of that is just, we just dug such a hole for so long that it's just taken a while to get out. I will say, along the way, we've had some incredibly gracious friends. And I got a text one day, mortgage was due, we were way behind. And, but never been late enough to be on late payment. But we were getting close, and I got a text that said, "Can you check your mailbox at the shop?" And I checked, and there was an envelope for $900 cash in there. I had a friend of mine walk in with a $1,000 check one day. Last year, we had a group of individuals change the trajectory. We were in bankruptcy mode, and they changed that from happening. So I will say we're still figuring that out, and thank God my wife's patient. And we're, and the kids are older and they can try to pay for some stuff themselves. But yeah, so I would just say, sometimes that's what you're wrestling with, and that's why I want to feed into people, because I know what it's like to be desperate. And I think desperate makes for a good entrepreneur, because comfortable doesn't really motivate you, right, Keita? Desperation will move you to action. So.
Okay, what other questions?
I have a question. It's kind of, I guess, spiritually based. But why do you think Jacob wrestled with God?
Danny?
We'll answer that often, but we'll answer that.
Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah. We'll do that.
Did he wrestle with God? Did he wrestle with God, or did he wrestle with himself? So yeah, we'll get into that.
I just say my hip's out of placement still, so
So stick around after for that.
We'll have that conversation. I'm just changing the direction here. What's your favorite hip hop band of all time? Come on, Kenny.
I walked across the
Come on.
to ask that.
Hey, anybody know Ice Cube just dropped a record and he's pissed off? It's pretty hilarious. So yeah, it's just funny because it's like I never thought some of these guys would get old and feel old, but like Wu-Tang just did a Tiny Desk show, and I'm like, I mean, you're cool and all, but you're old, man. Like I'm struggling. What would I say? Because I probably my favorite voice of all time is Guru, Gangstar, just because, man, if I could have that voice just for a day. But he did a few jazz records, Jazzmatazz, and draw in some old, like Donald Byrd and some real old jazz heads to do all the music and lay the rhymes over that. My number one record of the year is going to be Tierra Whack. I don't know if anybody's heard her, but she's amazing. Her album is literally, so you all can go listen to it. It's 15 minutes long. It's 15 one-minute songs, and she did 15 one-minute videos, and she's just a creative giant. Her and Earl Sweatshirt made the two shortest hip-hop records of the year, and they might be the best two. So that's where I stand. I stay current, man. I don't stay back in the day anymore. I mean, if you would consider it hip-hop, I would say Miseducation Lauryn Hill. But I mean, it's kind of now. And has anybody ever heard the Dissect podcast? Okay, so Dissect is this podcast, which sounds like a nerdy white dude running, and for the first couple of times I listened to it, I'm like, I can't do him. But he has done this podcast where he literally broke down all of Kendrick's, it was a Pimp the Butterfly in that one? Is that the one he did? And then he did Kanye's, and he did a Kanye album, and he did Frank Ocean, and he just did the Miseducation Lauryn Hill, and it's brilliant. And one of the things I don't know what this has to do with anything, but To Zion, which is like the third track on there, and it's a song to her child, and she's wrestling actually into lyrics about the people in her life she was 23, the Fugees had just blown up, they'd broken up, she's blowing up, and she's gonna be a phenom, and she's got people telling her to have an abortion, and so she's wrestling with that in the song, and in the is anybody listening to this episode? It's amazing. So in it, he talks about, like, the producer talks about taking these 4 chords, and he played them but usually the 4 chords are always gonna have a closure. So he plays these 4 chords that have closure, but on this particular riff, they don't have closure. Like the fourth chord is just, it's uncomfortable, it doesn't fit. And he plays it for Lauren, and Lauren sobs, and he's like, is it good? And she's like, yeah. And so what happens, the song is built around 4 chords that shouldn't fit together because it's a picture of the lyrical content, how she is wrestling with the awkwardness of her success and with what she has to do with her child and the way the world is making her wrestle. And so it's so I don't know. I'm just saying, man, you want to get educated on some hip hop, Dissect. Go to that one.
I'm not really sure where to take Q&A from there. Does anyone have Keenan? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know where to go with it either. But hey, Kenny, thank you so much for I don't really have a question. I just have a comment. And, I knew Frank back in Stoffs. And I remember we were close enough where he was telling me that he was in cahoots with you. And it was so, and so that brought me in. And what's so cool to me is seeing, like, the beehive that, like, when I think of Roosevelt, I think it's like a beehive, and and every day I go in there, it's like it takes me longer to walk to get there because of the parking situation. And and what's neat about it is that you're really modest, and you don't, it's like you never take that credit, right? You just, like, give it back, but it's like, it comes from the top down, and as someone that's been, like, going in there for years now, it's like you really see that. You know what I mean? There's not in our town is really entrepreneurial, and when it comes to business, people get that. But the one thing that I think a lot of times people don't realize is that human part. It's like business isn't all on the page. You know what I mean? And it's like. Yeah, it's just amazing, and it's so cool to see you two talking here, and to hear your story. And there's so much I learned about you tonight, and that I never knew, that I can't wait to ask you about next time I see you at coffee. So thanks.
I was just Keita gave the greatest advertisement of the Roosevelt ever about a couple months ago on Facebook. He posted my favorite part about the Roosevelt, in paraphrasing, is that he goes, all the people that you can't meet with for 6 to 8 weeks because they're booked out are at the Roosevelt. So you can get like 5 minutes and not have to book it out. And Keita's an example of like the Roosevelt. Like Keita and I are personal buddies because of a coffee shop, right? Aaron, Brock, Michael. I mean, Danny and I were buddies, but we became friends at the Roosevelt. So, yeah, Marshall. I mean, these are, real life people that I, have come to love and appreciate just because I run a coffee shop. What the hell?
I can say thank you enough. It's been such a fun time with you. Thanks. Thank you. Ryan was like, what's your plan? I said, what plan? What are you talking about? Can we give a huge thank you to Kenny?
That's exactly what I want to do. I want to let Kenny know how much you appreciate the sacrifice that him and his wife has made to make that place known. Let him know that right now. Come on. So Mike and I say we old friends. We're literally our old friends a long, long time. And so thank you for everything that you do. I know your heart. I know your love. I remember when he called me. He called eight of us. How many of us did you call? 8 or 12? Somewhere around there. Somewhere around. He called like 8 of us, and he says, hey, I just want to meet in my house. I got this crazy idea. And we started in that table, and I argued with him about Roosevelt, the name. I said, I don't like that name. He's like, but I like it. But this is a man that he lives it on his sleeve, and I appreciate him. I thank God for you. And I'm going to pray many, many blessings over and above for everything that you sacrifice. And so when you see this man in the street, give him a hug. And you know his place is popping. When Mike and I have our own place, and we're fighting for parking, to pay for coffee to sit in his place. And we pay for this place. So you know you have a hot place when that's happening. So Mike and I literally meet there every day before we come here. So thank you for providing that space. And thank you all guys for coming out. And Wyland Park, listen, we want to bless them too. So if you want to give any money or anything to them, we're going to go buy hats. Thank you for wearing a sweater. We're going to have a little contest, but only like 3 of us wore it. So we all won. The 3 that wore it are going to get something. You know what I mean? Like, what is it? A sweater contest. It's a win-win. I just can't win. So thank you very much. Look forward to seeing all of you guys in 2019. Hang out for a while, eat some food, and we'll see you in 2019.
It's all cold.